All right, welcome in WagerTalk.com. Another week, another time to get an early edge here with college football. He is Mr. Dave Cokin. I'm Joe Raineri. Guys, thank you very much for stopping by as we head into week 9 of the college football season. And what a week last week was. Certainly a whole lot of first looks for some teams in one particular conference there, Dave. Before we dive into some of what we learned last week, let's talk a little bit about your week, because it was pretty darn impressive. And for those of you that might just be joining us and don't know, at WagerTalk and Dave, we have 5% plays that a lot of handicappers put out. But Dave doesn't put them out very often. But I can guarantee you this, and the numbers speak for themselves. When Dave has a 5% play up, there's a pretty good reason why. And Dave, congratulations, you nailed your 5%ers over the weekend. NFL, I believe, and college. It's been a hell of a run.
I don't think I've ever had 2 in the same week. I had one in the NFL. I only average 2, maybe 3 a month at that level, because I bet them the same way I give them out. So, and I'm not the most liberal spender of all time. So it was the 49ers this week, or this past weekend, and I think you can make a good argument it was the best play on the board. I know there were a lot of people on the other side, but I was convinced San Francisco was the better football team and really liked the idea of them getting points. And obviously it worked out very well. So the 5% plays over the last 13 months, all of them in all sports, are 76-point-something%. So when I have one, and I don't know if I'll have one this week or not, I don't right now, but when I have one, it's worth being on it. Chances are it's going to get there, and that's why you have the packages, because if I do have a 5% play, it goes out to the subscribers first.
Always, guys, always.
Well, the important thing is it didn't matter in the NFL game, but it has mattered in college, is that the people who are on for all access get to play first, and they're going to get the best number. Yep.
And we've had a situation where, if you watch this show, for instance, early on in the week, Dave has been on top of a lot of these line movements. Just the other week, Miami, as a matter of fact, Miami-Pittsburgh, you ended up having both sides there, a great middle. That doesn't happen very often, but it pays to pay attention, shall we say, and stay on top of it, as opposed to just waking up and throwing some shit against the wall and see what sticks there, Dave.
Well, on my end, it's a 7-day-a-week job.
Yes.
It just is, because you got to get out there not in front of the information, but be ready to jump on something when the information hits, if it's meaningful.
Right.
And otherwise, you're it's, and you've got to anticipate the line moves. Get those. I have the screen on all day, my Don Best screen, and so if something's happening, I can see it before it's a mass movement and maybe take advantage of it.
Want to talk, and guys, we're going to talk a little bit about some look-ahead lines and look-ahead games coming up here for some of the big brands in college football. But I want to start with a little bit of some of these results from the past weekend here, Dave, because some of these results are a little bit misleading, I would say. A lot of people will just look at the scores. They didn't watch the game, but they just see a blowout. For instance, Pittsburgh-Notre Dame comes to mind. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh was getting more yards per play than Notre Dame did. They had a blocked punt. They had a long drive, but it wasn't pure domination like the score indicated it was. And we had a few games like this, and I'll start with one of the ones that's a total head scratcher here for a lot of people. Michigan State, 27, Rutgers finally winning a game with Shiano, 38. I guess maybe the thing that is a little misleading is if you looked at that, you went Rutgers. Well, that's what happens when you turn the ball over. You lose 5 fumbles and 2 interceptions. When you turn the ball over 7 times, it's a little misleading with the score and the program at that point.
It is. Rutgers was a sharp money side last week, so they got that right. And Rutgers was the better team. But I mean, you do have to look at the turnovers and assume that when they're that ridiculous that there'll be some kind of correction.
Yes, there usually is. Penn State, Indiana. A lot of people just can't believe that. Pure dominance from a from a number standpoint. Penn State, more yardage, more per yard, yards per play. I mean, you name it across the board. But Indiana was able to capitalize when they crossed the 40 of Penn State. They were able to get points in a lot of those situations. How misleading is that game? Because looking ahead now, what are the markets going to do?
It was very misleading. Penn State killed them. They did. I mean, 277-yard advantage.
Yep.
And the only reason Indiana wins the game is that Penn State doesn't know enough to not score at the end of regulation. It's amazing. We saw it 2 games in 2 days.
Yep.
Where Penn State scores a touchdown they should not have scored, and eventually lost the game.
Yep.
And the Atlanta Falcons did the same thing on Sunday when Todd Gurley knew he made the mistake and he tried to correct it, but too late he crossed the goal line, and that allowed the Detroit Lions to go down the field and win the game in the last play of the game. I don't know how I don't know how that happens, but it clearly was, to me, the most misleading result of the week was Indiana. I mean, I didn't have anything on the game, so it didn't matter to me either way. But Penn State they dominated that football game, and we'll see what Indiana does this week. They've got a tricky spot against Rutgers.
Yep.
Indiana's got Michigan on deck. They're coming off what for them is a tremendous win. This is it's one of those games where I think the situational scheduling dynamics guys are probably going to get on the Rutgers side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and a lot of people are still questioning, is Michigan State that bad, or is Rutgers and the Greg Schiano era off to a great start? Are they? You said they were the better football team on the field there. Now, does that say more about Schiano and Rutgers, or does that say more about, Mel Tucker and what he's got going on in Michigan State right now?
Kind of both. I mean, I think I don't know if I mentioned on this show or what show, but I think there was a strange hire for Michigan State. It's Michigan State, and taking Mel Tucker was not exactly. He didn't exactly work wonders as a head coach in Colorado. I just didn't understand that one. And Schiano's a huge upgrade for Rutgers at the head coaching, and they actually brought in some guys who can play a little bit. So I'm not saying Rutgers is suddenly going to ascend to the top of the Big Ten, but they're going to improve, and it wouldn't surprise me if Rutgers, within a year or two, is making it to a minor bowl game.
And the reason we bring it up, too, guys, and it's an important question to ask, you said strange hire. It was a weird game. In a lot of the metrics, Michigan State was, the better team that day. But I don't know that anybody would see a 25-point differential between Michigan and Michigan State, which is what we're looking at here.
That's a huge number.
I don't think anybody would have. Now, and again, it goes back to, Michigan was impressive in their victory, but who was more impressive? Michigan in victory or Michigan State in loss? It's
Michigan by a lot. Michigan
by a lot. Perfect.
Oh yeah, I mean Michigan State made a lot of mistakes, but they were still pretty bad. And I don't think they're a very good football team. That number though is ridiculous. I don't know that I'll play Michigan State, but I can tell you I won't be on Michigan, not at that price. No,
it's a little head scratching. I don't think anybody saw that coming this year. But you mentioned Penn State, too. 2-touchdown underdog now to Ohio State. I don't think James Franklin saw that coming. I don't think anybody did. But COVID-19, a lot of opt-outs, a lot of guys down. Listen, it's a talented program, but we just watched what Ohio State's bringing to the table. I guess anybody that might have had a question mark about Ohio State, I think that's been put to bed. 2 touchdowns, though?
I don't think anybody had a question mark on Ohio State.
That's a good point.
They're really good. Yeah, Penn State qualifies as a stat dog, but it's only on one game. They did have the better yardage and against a better opponent than Ohio State did. But I'm not putting much into one game. But it's there. But the other one's Missouri.
Yes.
They've actually got better stats against a tougher schedule than Florida. But that's also one that I'm a little leery of. But what it does do, I don't like to play against those teams. So their games are kind of scratched off. I don't think I'd be running to lay the points with Florida. And that is a ton of points in the Ohio State-Penn State game. Although, bear in mind, Penn State really hurting at running back now, which was such a strong rotation for them. And now they got a guy hurt. Another guy is not playing, Journey Brown. And basically their 4-man rotation is down to 1.
Yep. It's and I have the feeling, and we've mentioned it a whole bunch of times on the show here, Dave. It is such a unique situation this year. It's throw everything that you've leaned on in the past in a lot of these situations, and you're just scratching your head, and at best you're trying to guesstimate exactly what does it all mean. Especially, look at Wisconsin right now. Wisconsin looked like this wasn't Jonathan Taylor running all over everybody. This was all of a sudden Wisconsin throwing the ball all over the field. But now all of a sudden Graham is out 21 days. So now what do you do?
Quarterback.
What do you do now? Like, how do you even go and handicap
that's the beauty of having all these games to play. You
Yes.
bet them all.
Yeah. It's so true.
I don't know what the fourth string Wisconsin quarterback's like, and I don't know how they're going to game plan. So I'll just leave the game alone and try and learn something from it.
Well, what do? You mentioned Missouri. How about the team they beat, Kentucky, who had, I think, 112 yards? They only scored 10 points. Kentucky's defense is good. We know it. Offense has always been hit or miss. But now they come into a game against Georgia.
They don't have the skill position, guys.
That's the problem. Yeah, that's always the problem.
That. They're not bad in the trenches on either side of the ball, but they just don't have skill position talent. And it's tough to upgrade there because, those are the highlight reel guys, and they go to the schools where they're going to get on the most highlight reels. So I don't know what Kentucky does as far as that goes, but it's not good for them, that's for sure. And they were not good. They were not good at all against Missouri.
Nope. No. And they got now over a 2-touchdown underdog going up against Georgia. And I think the big question mark is that defense good enough to hang within a couple of touchdowns at Georgia? Is the question a lot of people are probably going to ask themselves.
They're also catching Georgia at what might be an inopportune time. I know Georgia's got Florida up next, but there's a bye week coming up for Georgia and Florida after this weekend. So I don't know how much of a look ahead that is. And Georgia probably wants to put the second half of that Alabama game out of their memory as quickly as possible. So they might take it out in Kentucky this weekend. Yep.
Now, Ohio State, they ended up dismantling Nebraska. Nebraska's got an interesting game coming up this weekend. But I don't know. Are people looking at Nebraska, and do you discount because they lost the way they did Ohio State, or are you going to go, it's Ohio State?
Again, I don't know what to make of the game because of Wisconsin.
Right. Well, that's going to be.
It's a fraud. It was an immediate cross-out for me.
Right. And so,
in other words, with every game in the schedule this week, that's the last game I would bet. If you were asking me to rate games in confidence order, that would be the very last game. So clearly I have no opinion that's worth even talking about.
I love that. Now, by the way, I just want to ask you one last thing here. We'll start looking ahead here, guys. Take a look at the numbers for this week. See if we can pull out a couple of early edges for you, because ultimately, looking at this right now, there are going to be in the marketplace, there are still some teams being undervalued. There are probably going to be big overreactions from what we just saw this past week. But am I crazy to think that Kansas State is the second best team in the Big 10, in the Big 12, possibly the best team in the Big 12?
No, they're not.
Well, how would you rank the Big 12? It's intriguing because I don't see them. If they beat Oklahoma State, I don't see them losing 2 games. They're going to be in the Big 12 championship.
They might well be, but they're not one of the 2 best teams in the conference. They have no quarterback. They can't throw the ball.
Right.
Their defense is quite good. And,
impressive.
I'd give them a good shot this weekend at West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
The game's a consideration for me. I don't know if I'll play it or not, but looking at Kansas State side, because I don't think much of West Virginia. Quarterback's been erratic.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the Baylor win was just an awful performance by both teams that they happened to win. They lose to Texas Tech, which isn't a very good football team. I think Kansas State might be able to win that game on their defense and smart coaching. I mean, they're a well-coached football team. They don't take many chances, which is smart because they're not built to take chances. They're built to play ball control, defense, field position, that type of thing. And if they can accomplish that, they'll have a really good chance to beat West Virginia. And I do think the coaching edge might be significant there.
There is one team also this week, another big game coming off of a pretty impressive win over SMU. Cincinnati, now a top 10 team, I think number 7 in the country, I think, as the polls came out this week.
They're not the 7th best team in the country. The polls, don't pay attention to the polls.
Right.
Act like they don't. they don't exist, okay, because they're terrible. And Cincinnati's not the 7th best team in the country, but they're very good.
Right.
And they're the best team in the American. So, they're probably a top 15 team. They're just not I don't think they're a top 7 team. If you put Cincinnati in the SEC, they might be the 7th best team in the SEC. But Cincinnati's really good. Very, very solid defensively. And
I think it's an interesting line against Memphis this week. You have number 7 team in the country against an unranked opponent, and it's barely a touchdown.
That's why I just said, don't pay attention to the rankings.
Right. Because that's red flag after red flag right there. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
The rankings are done by people who don't really follow college football.
Right.
They just look at scores.
Right.
That's it. They just look at the scores. They're not. They have no idea what they're looking at. No, Cincinnati really crushed SMU over the weekend. Had it not been for a couple of penalties in the game, the final score wasn't misleading because they blew them out late, but it wasn't misleading the other way either. I mean, Cincinnati was way better than SMU in that game.
Yep.
That was on the road. But bear in mind, I had Cincinnati as a play.
Yeah.
SMU is a phony unbeaten. And Cincinnati's a legit team.
Yep, they are. And it's going to be, and they're a matchup nightmare for Memphis. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that. And a reminder, guys, of course, Dave will have his plays up here as we progress through the week. So if you're new, you're just joining us, head over to WagerTalk.com. Make sure you check out Dave Cokin's plays. You'll have them up, correct, right?
What's that?
You have them up, right? You'll have them up throughout the week if you're adding anything.
I have 2 up as of now, and wanted to get on those at what I think were, one of them wasn't a great number, but it's the best I'm going to get, and the other one I did get a good number on. I think that the number on the other game is going to come down before the weekend. So, yeah, those are up now, and again, I put those up first for my All Access players. I put those up Monday for the All Access players and didn't sell them individually till today.
Let's talk about some of these look-ahead situations we have. And again, that's not this week, guys. We're talking about teams looking next weekend, and it's some very interesting spots here, right? Like,
well, yeah. In the example, the best example is Clemson and Notre Dame.
Oh,
because they play next week.
Yep.
So now it doesn't automatically mean that you play against them this week, but they're the type of spots where I probably don't want to be on Clemson or Notre Dame this week, because there is a mental look ahead. You wonder how much preparation they're doing for this week's opponent as opposed to already game planning for next week. And so they're not ideal spots to be on Clemson or Notre Dame. And that's how you throw games out. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to take the other team, but I don't want Clemson or Notre Dame. Another example, and on the stats, Duke should handle Charlotte. I mean, Duke's a better team than Charlotte.
Yeah.
But Duke's got North Carolina next week. I don't know how much this game means to them. It probably means more to Charlotte. So it's one of those situations where I look at it and I really don't want any part of Duke, even though I know they're a better football team.
How about, and one game we didn't talk about, but how about Purdue and Iowa, a game that Purdue ended up winning? No head coach, missing some key people, obviously. Still were able to pull it out 24-20. And then you look at that, I guess maybe the whole Big Ten in general here, Dave. It's still a little bit early, especially now with Wisconsin. What's going to happen next with some of these teams?
Well, that's, again, it falls into the I don't know category.
Right.
Purdue have a letdown here, playing what might be the worst team in the conference. Illinois is no good. And they've got Wisconsin up next. That was a very exciting and rewarding win for Purdue against Iowa.
Yep.
So I don't know. I'm not saying it's a dead spot because it's only their second game, and they could well build off the momentum from last week. But it's also possibly a spot where they don't have their most focused effort with a bigger game next week and playing a team that, if they watch the game film on Illinois, they're going to think that this is going to be an easy game. And you can look at those situations with a lot of teams. Indiana is off that great win with Penn State. They're playing Rutgers, who they beat by 1 million last year. And they've got Michigan up next. So this is a bit of a sandwich for Indiana. The scheduling guys will play Rutgers in this game. BYU, Western Kentucky this week. Boise's got Air Force. They play each other next week. That's the biggest game of the schedule. for both teams, even though it's a non-conference game. UL Lafayette is off a national TV win at UAB, which never loses at home.
Ever.
They've got a bigger game with Arkansas State next week. Could be a little bit of a letdown spot for UL Lafayette. Alabama's got LSU next week. Not that Alabama ever needs. I mean, Alabama's always daunting to play against, but they do have a bigger game next week. And then we mentioned Georgia, Florida. This one I discounted because there's a bye week in between, but the world's largest cocktail party won't be the world's largest cocktail party this year, but it's still a huge game between Georgia and Florida coming up in 2 weeks.
Yep. Yeah, a lot. And a 3-week process, Dave, for those that might be just dabbling here into college football. You look at who they played last week, who they're playing this week, who they're looking at next week. Is that kind of the blueprint on a consistent basis that you always approach this?
Well, I factor in on a lot of stuff. So, I mean, I can't really answer that question. By the way, it looks like Marshall, Florida International just got postponed.
Oh,
canceled.
Oh, you had a bet on it, I guess, huh?
No, I didn't. No, actually, I have not had it canceled. I had one last week, as usual, but I have not yet had a game canceled this week. But Marshall, Florida International is now off the board. Want to run down some moves?
Yeah, talk to us. Talk to us about some of the let's head to the bank here and let's figure out some of these money movers here. What have you seen so far early on in the week?
Little money on the dog in the South Alabama-Georgia Southern game. I think that has to do with Wirtz. I think he's fine to play, but he did leave the game with an injury last week. He came back in the fourth quarter, but didn't look like he was really sharp. So I think there might be some opinion out there that he might not be at 100%. So keep an eye on that one. On the Friday games, there's been a little movement on Wyoming as a small home dog against Hawaii. But bear in mind, Hawaii did not go back to the islands. They stayed on the mainland. So the travel factor isn't as bad as it must be. Moving to Saturday's action, going through some of these games. I'm using my screen and some notes. So if I pause here and there, it's just to get a feel of what I want to say. Notre Dame is actually getting play against Georgia Tech, even with the Clemson game next week. I guess people aren't buying Georgia Tech to any extent, which kind of makes some sense. I mentioned the Charlotte-Duke game earlier as a potentially not great spot for Duke as far as scheduling goes, and looks like the market agrees because we're seeing that line move down now. It's actually hit single digits at a couple of shops. I think you'll see movement on the Indiana Rutgers game. I believe it hasn't come yet, but I think it will be on the Rutgers side as we get deeper into the week. Let's see what else we've got here. I'm moving down my list very slowly. A little money showing on North Texas now against UTEP. That line's bumped up a bit. I'm a little leery of UTEP's defense is actually been respectable. I mean, they're an awful program.
Right, but
I don't know about North Texas on the road. So Boise State's getting a lot of money against the Air Force, and I'm not surprised about this. Air Force.
Oh, that San Jose State game was
impressive. They were very impressive against Navy, but that was a good matchup for them.
Right.
Okay, it wasn't a good matchup for them against San Jose State, and they didn't look real good in that football game. And they might have trouble staying with Boise for 60 minutes, even with Boise looking ahead potentially to the BYU game. Nevada, not surprisingly, is getting a lot of money. It's a revenge game for them, and it's a rivalry that's underrated, the battle for the Fremont Cannon. UNLV won it last year. There were problems at the end of the game. The teams don't like each other. There was a fight at the end of the game. Not the first time that's happened in that series. The Rebels were absolutely horrible against San Diego State. I mean, unbelievably bad. So the money is showing on Nevada. I'm not surprised at that at all. That number's now up to 2 touchdowns. Rice Southern Mississippi has to be mentioned. Now, this is an adjustment. Just the strangest thing. Southern Mississippi, their coach quit after the first game.
That's right, yeah.
They brought in an interim coach, and he just quit to take the Austin Peay head coaching job.
Yep.
So now they're on their 3rd head coach of the season. Not exactly an ideal situation. Rice is coming off a weird loss against Mississippi.
You had talked about Rice last week, too. I know you had that up on at WagerTalk.com. It was your free play.
I lost the game.
What a great comeback for them, and then they just threw up and over. It was a weird game. You're right, all over.
was crazy.
Yep.
Rice did something I've never seen this happen before, and I doubt I ever will again. Game-winning field goal attempt in overtime.
Mm-hmm.
Hits the right goalpost, bounces off the crossbar, hits the left goalpost, and bounces off the crossbar again, and then falls down on the ground. A quadruple doink.
Yep.
I don't know anybody who's ever seen that before. We've seen triple doinks, but this was a quadruple doink, and then they lost the game. I thought their play calling in overtime was just horrendous, so I put a lot of that on the coach. But anyway, Rice probably in good shape to get a win at Southern Miss. You would think they have an advantage on the sidelines in that game. Let's see what else we've got moving around here. The Wisconsin-Nebraska game is obviously off the board in most places now because of the Wisconsin QB situation. Let's see if we've got a few more here. Tulane has ticked up a bit from where it opened because of the uncertainty at the Temple quarterback position. Russo hurt his shoulder, and he's questionable. Kenny White drop off from Russo to the backup is I think it's 3.5. I'm not sure. I might be off a point on that. I'm not sure I agree on that. Temple the coach likes both backup quarterbacks, and Russo hasn't been real good this year. So I'm not so sure that I'd adjust it that much for Russo's questionable status. And if he's playing, this line will go back down.
Yep.
Some places have it off the board. Some places have it up. What else do we have here? Iowa State and Kansas. Shocker. They're betting Iowa State.
Woohoo! That could be up to 30 points for it's all said and done. Anything on UCF Houston, by the way? Anything? Any movement on that?
On what?
On UCF in Houston?
No, not to speak of. Yeah, I mean, Kansas is just a cash cow betting against them. But bear in mind, Iowa State has a nagging tendency to play up or down to the level of their opponent.
Yes.
They don't always play their best football against their weakest opponents. So I'm not so sure I'll lay 28.5 in that game. LSU's getting a little money against Auburn, which is not surprising. LSU has a good game, and Auburn is just not getting it done. Bo Nix is just not delivering the goods at quarterback. UAB, this didn't surprise me at all. UAB, they opened the game too short. Statistically, it's a mismatch against Louisiana Tech. The money is poured in on the UAB side in that game. They're up to 11.5 and 12. I don't think it'll get much higher. I think you'll get resistance at 12.5. But I think they missed on the opening number on that game. And I think there's money on Texas A&M against Arkansas. But bear in mind, that's been a good rivalry.
Yeah.
Going back to their Southwest Conference Southwest Conference days, and Arkansas, while they're not a very good football team, they'll put forth their best effort against A&M. This is probably, for them, I would think this is the biggest game on their schedule. And, we now have a line in the New Mexico-San Jose State game, which has been moved. It was San Jose State at New Mexico. It's now New Mexico at San Jose State, and it's a 5-point adjustment in the line, which...
Wow.
I don't buy into that in 2020 because I don't think the home field advantages are there.
Right.
And they've basically made this a 2.5-point home field advantage.
Wow.
If it was 2.5 the other way, now it's 2.5 the other way. I'm not sure I agree with that. And San Jose State was very impressive last week, but that number looks a little high. That could end up on my card. I'm going to go back and redo the game because I did it with originally with San Jose State at New Mexico, and I'll redo it. But I don't look at that as being a tremendous disadvantage. I do have to find out who's playing for New Mexico.
Right.
That could be an issue.
Yep.
I think that is it.
There's a few other very interesting games too early on. I don't know. Do you think Northwestern gets a little overreaction from their showing against, or I mean, they're playing Iowa, who just lost to Purdue.
I didn't get the scenario I wanted. I might have mentioned this last week. I was hoping Northwestern would struggle in their game, and that I would win at Purdue, and then I was going to be on Northwestern, absolutely for sure in this game. But now there's been a line adjustment because Northwestern just beat the crap out of their opponent last week. And Iowa lost the game, and I don't know that I'm getting what I wanted to get in this game with the Wildcats.
And how about the Chanticleers? We mentioned them last week, actually the week before,
that was
too.
Good, but I lost that game. I took Georgia Southern, and they were the Wirtz injury had nothing to do with it. That was a dead wrong side.
Backup quarterback, and they ran all over Georgia Southern. Like, ran all over them with a backup quarterback, too.
Yeah, they're really good.
Yeah.
I didn't think they were this good. And that was not a good spot for Coastal Carolina.
Nope.
I bet Georgia Southern in the situational spot, and it didn't work. I mean, I was in the game, but I was never in the game. I knew I had the wrong side of the game. By halftime, I was like, I'm not going to win this, and I didn't.
That was impressive, guys. That was an impressive, fun team. I'm not sure. You think the market they're laying 3 on the road to Georgia State here.
They're legit.
They're legit. Perfect.
Yeah.
Love it. Great games, guys, coming up this week. And, of course, if you head over to WagerTalk.com, Mr. Cokin there, he's already got 2 plays up. There are, in all likelihood, an extra play or 2 probably coming here as the week progresses. Yep. So get there soon right now over at WagerTalk.com. The early edges. Seems like this when we started this, Dave, there were it seemed like a handful of games, and now it's continuing to grow and grow. We've got Pac-12 coming down the road. Still trying to figure out what to make of the Big Ten here, but a lot of these other teams, making some noise here early on. I'll give you one final one, though, of the 30 or more teams that are getting 30 or more points this weekend. One of them is BC at Clemson. The other, Mississippi State at Alabama. Who, in your opinion, has a better chance of covering and staying within 30?
I have no idea. It's an honest answer. Look, I don't.
Well, you mentioned Clemson look ahead, right? A possible Clemson look ahead.
I just mentioned that. That's why I don't particularly want Clemson in this spot.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you can't murder this team.
Right. Especially at home.
Look, I mean, the way I do things, if I've got an opinion on a game, and it's a decent opinion, I'll back it with a bet. If I don't, I'd rather not even give out my opinion because I don't want to influence somebody with something I don't.
You're not
really
betting yourself.
Yep. There's no way I'm playing either of those 2 games this week.
Good.
So, if you've got an opinion on it, fire away. And good luck. But you're not going to get anything from me on either of those
Try
games.
to avoid those 30-plus games at all costs.
This isn't TV where you're going to give out, they have to give an opinion on every game.
Correct.
On TV,
yep.
Whether they like it or not.
That's true.
Handicappers don't have to do that.
Yep. That's correct.
My opinion, and that's why you won't see me. I know there's a show we do on Wager Talk that's every game on the board. And it's great, but I could never do a show like that.
Right.
Because I'd just be sitting there going, pass, pass, pass.
Next.
I'm only in this for one reason. That's to win.
Amen to that.
I hate losing. Hate it.
Amen. And guys, don't forget, it's been a hell of a run, continues to be so. 5% plays from Dave Cokin. It was a great weekend last weekend. It's going to be another great weekend this weekend. But get on board, guys. The only way to get the plays early enough where you can really do some damage is with an all-access pass, of course. Dave releases his plays to his members first, and then after that, it's kind of first come, first serve. So get yourself an all-access pass. Now would be the time to do it as we head into week 9 of the college football season here, Dave.
Let's go get it done.
Let's get it done, guys. All right, it's the Early Edge. Make sure you subscribe here on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up and make sure that you come back and join us again next week as we look towards week 10 of getting you that early edge. He's Dave Cokin. I'm Joe Raineri. Good luck, guys. We'll talk to you again next week.